Welcome to Spark 101 Voices, where we have stimulating conversations around STEM learning and STEM earning. On this episode, I will talk with Mike Kimsey, President of the Board of the Kimsey Foundation. The Kimsey Foundation is a private foundation based in Washington, D.C., whose focus is supporting educational and cultural initiatives for the people of the district and beyond. Welcome to Spark 101 Voices, Mike. Let's start by having you tell us a little bit about your background.
I wasn't a particularly great student, but when I came out of college, I got a normal job and working in the credit department of an office products company. Moved to a bank, but when that bank shut down, I sort of began to look at my life and decided I really hated working in an office all day. And so I wanted to do something that was more active, where I can use both my brain and my body. And so ended up joining the Army, enlisting, as a matter of fact. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And in fact, basic training itself, I was older and slightly more wise than a lot of the kids that were there. And it was it was like, I don't know how any other way to describe it. It was a fascinating experience. And I learned a lot about myself in that experience. I learned a lot about, folks that I would never have interacted with in my entire life. I learned about our differences and how we're all the same as well. And that informed me, I think, to a large degree, and how I relate to our city and the rest of the world when it comes to the work with our foundation. And just understanding that the most interesting thing about people is their brain. And when you start talking to them, you can learn a lot about people. And so it's important to get past the facade and get into talking with them. And then, so I was in the military for on and off for about 10 years. And while I was still in the military, my dad offered me a job at the foundation. I said, absolutely. In fact, I was kind of hoping he would ask me. And that's sort of what I've been doing ever since. Basically, I've been working for the foundation for a number of years. After my dad passed away, I stopped actually being an employee, but so now I'm just a board member, and I don't work for anybody else, which is kind of nice. So I can kind of do my own thing.
Talk to us a little bit about what the Kimsey Foundation does.
Well, the foundation was started back in the mid-'90s by my dad. He included me and my brothers as board members, and it was just primarily a way for him to give back from his success at AOL. And I came to work for the foundation when did I come to work for the foundation? I guess it was in the 90s. Generally focused on Washington, D.C. and education issues. We also supported the arts. And unfortunately at the time, though, it didn't take long for AOL to plummet. And so we found ourselves in a bit of a pickle, and were not as able to give out as much money as we'd hoped. And so what I did is I found that as an opportunity as a learning opportunity, basically. And so I had met a variety of people, particularly in Ward 8, and I just listened to them. And I learned a lot about what was going on in poor Black communities. And it was a fascinating learning experience for me.
Where in D.C. is Ward 8?
Southeast D.C. It's across the Anacostia River. The Anacostia River proves to be quite a barrier for a lot of the folks who live in Wards 7 and 8. And it's just where a lot of the public housing is, and it's just a lot of concentrated poverty. And so I just found it a place where I could do a lot of learning about what are the real issues.
And can you talk about the issues that stem from your learning there? What did you learn in talking to these people?
The best thing is to highlight one thing in particular. Is the problems are they're rarely obvious. In talking with a group of guys who were just being open with me, they were saying how difficult it is to get a job after when you come out of prison. And one of the issues was just getting an ID, because it happens a lot of the times. There might be some fine or some debt they might have with the DMV, and they can't pay it because they haven't had a job in a while. But they can't even get a walking ID so they can get a job. So it was a trap. And I actually talked to the DMV. I don't know if it was the president or what her title was, but it's actually something they were aware of, and we talked a lot and worked together as far as trying to resolve that. And they had fixed it so that if you you didn't have to pay anything to get a walking ID. You had to for a driver's license, but you didn't have to pay for a walking ID. So that was one problem. But it just highlighted for me that there's these little things, these little structural things that keep people in a bind that can be solved.
So that doesn't sound like you mentioned it's a key little thing, but when you think about a foundation, you think of attacking greater problems or trying to solve grander things. This is a very personal thing you're trying to work on and solving. Is that what you like to do more through the foundation, or is that more of an individual item you want to champion?
I think it takes both. For me, yeah, I prefer to get down into the details, because usually that's where the devil is you gotta get into the details to find where you can really make people's lives better. But we were focusing on grander educational issues as well. We were a big proponent of charter schools. We supported a variety of charter schools, including KIPP. And we were also a big proponent of the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program. We just held the philosophy that everybody should have opportunities for choice in education, not just the rich or even the middle class. And I think we felt just philosophically that would help education.
Any other community-focused things that you thought were very interesting?
In the initial stages, it was organizations like Fair Chance. Fair Chance is an organization that provides support for small nonprofits in the local DC area, and I thought that was important. We were also involved with VPP, which was a larger organization that provided a lot of support, financial and otherwise, but to larger organizations, larger nonprofits, in an effort to help them grow. I wanted to counterbalance that with Fair Chance, and we supported them from the beginning in supporting small nonprofits, what I would call sort of mom and pop type shops, and helping to build their capacity, their skills, and their ability just to help the people in their own communities.
Why do you see value in doing that over a larger, more encompassing nonprofit?
I think there's huge value in supporting the mom and pops and the smaller nonprofits, improving their skills. If we focus too much on large organizations, then we're all beholden to large organizations. I love the entrepreneurial spirit, and you can even find that in nonprofits. And when you have local folks trying to help local folks, it can only be good for the community to help them with their skill sets.
Would you say that leads you into, one of your missions being building enduring livable communities? Is that...
You're looking at our website, that's not fair.
Why is this still of value to you?
Well, I've gone through, I don't even know what to call it, certainly a learning curve. And it's a lot harder than one might think to try to help people. It's complicated. And so I've been paying attention to, because we're focused primarily on education, and I've been paying attention. And I have not been satisfied, along with a lot of other people. When you look at what's going on in universities today, when you look at the size of student debt, when you look at students coming out of university and not even coming close to getting into a career they were hoping to get into, that's a problem. And I think universities in our country have failed over the last decade or two, just because they're taking advantage of public policy to expand their administration, to expand the offerings they have to a degree where they're not really offering the kind of education people need to get into careers. And I think that needs to change somehow. Somehow we have to offer better ways for young people to get into careers, ones that aren't nearly as expensive, ones that offer much better pathways, much more direct pathways to careers.
Do you think that current events of COVID and closing of schools are really exposing that area that you're talking about? Having students challenged to get to education now, everybody's being challenged to a point. Do you think that's really exposing some of these underlying problems?
I think, to be certain, yes. I think it will accelerate the closing of many of the smaller colleges and universities that aren't doing their job. But I also think it's an opportunity to redesign how people get through college, to find perhaps more direct routes to careers. I think I predicted this back in, I think it was 96. Colleges are going to have to adapt. And if they don't, they're going to have to close. Just because the market will dictate. People will get tired of spending 4 to 8 years of their life just racking up debt and not getting into a career. So families and young people are going to start saying, look, I just want a better pathway. And that's already happening. It's already happening in the tech industry. There are a variety of initiatives out there to design more compact credentials that have much more meaning and currency than what's available today. I think the big barrier, or I should say the big barrier right now is more of a cultural thing. It's what people are used to. You've been told your whole life that you need to go to college in order to get a decent career, in order to get ahead, but that's just not the case anymore. College degree is not the delineator that it used to be. It was great when I was a kid. It's just not that case anymore. I'm hoping that we can quiet down this mantra, this sort of talking point that kids really need to go to college to get ahead. It's just not true. In fact, I think there are opportunities, particularly for folks that are in underserved communities, to leapfrog ahead of the rest of the pack. If you dismiss this talking point that you have to go to college, you can leapfrog ahead of everybody else. If you're tech-minded, there are plenty of tech programs that'll get you in. It's still a great education. I think there are ways to design credentials for continuing education, so that as you have a job and you've been trained to do a great job, whatever that is particularly in tech, or automotive, whatever industry that's out there. I think hospitality is also doing the same thing. There's still plenty of great ways to do continuing education so you can get more of a breadth of knowledge.
One of the foundation focuses is leveraging technology. How does this come into play in the work that you're doing?
Back when I was sort of trying to read the tea leaves when it comes to university education, I came across an effort that's called digital badging. And this is back in 2014, I think it was. And so I was trying to do a lot of reading and watching and trying to understand what was going on with that. And it's associated with micro-credentialing, as you probably know. And all roads seemed to lead to Connie Yao, who was at the MacArthur Foundation at the time. And so I got a hold of her, got in touch with her. We had an amazing conversation. I learned about the Cities of Learning initiative that the MacArthur Foundation was doing, and I wanted DC to be a part of it. So we did, I think she was the one who introduced me to Michael Robbins, and we started something called District of Learning to develop digital badging in Washington, D.C. And it's supposed to mirror what's happening in Chicago and several other cities with the cities of learning. So that was a way to develop infrastructure. That's pretty much what digital badging is infrastructure to represent credentials that you might achieve through either learning or some kind of experience or some kind of task that you can take those badges and show somebody, here's what I've done. So it was a way to get non-traditional schooling experience validated and be able to use that to go for either higher degrees or get job experience. And I was very excited about that. It was a big learning curve. I think it was a very difficult thing to do. And where we did not focus enough, I think, was on the credential part. And so I'm trying to work with Kathleen Delaski with the Education Design Lab. Also, there's CityWorks DC, who's being run by Jenny Niles. And they are working very diligently and I think effectively in developing different kinds of credentials that'll have real currency for people. And so I'm trying to learn about their efforts and see how I can participate in that. So I think that's how technology can help. I think with platforms that have developed over the last decade that have become quite sophisticated, we can develop, or people can develop, credentials and ways of representing those credentials to employers so they have real currency.
You've mentioned a lot. I had to learn this, I had to learn that. Can you talk to me about the value of being, I want to use the phrase lifelong learner, but that really seems to be where you are, because you mentioned you're retired, but you're still learning. What's the value of that in your world, or the value of that to be a leader?
I don't know. I guess I'm not sure how to put a frame around that, because it's just sort of the way I look at it, particularly in this space. I mean, there's always somebody who knows a lot more about this than I do. And I'm not a trained educator. I'm not trained in technology. I'm not trained in all the particular areas that people would need to be trained in to affect this kind of change. So I have to rely on them. What I like to do is find out who those people are and learn about what it is they do and how they do it, and figure out how I can support them, whether it's monetarily or some other ways of providing support for them. Yeah, I'm not going to be the guy who does it. I'm not designing websites. I'm not designing credentials. I'm not going to be doing any of that. But I know there are a lot of great people out there who do, and I'm just trying to figure out how can I best support them. I think it's important for me to learn about it, just because I need to know who those people are. And if you don't learn enough about it, then you can go down the wrong road.
You mentioned the changes that you've been able to make and the help you've been able to give the community through the walking IDs. You've mentioned the work that you're looking into digital badging and making that of value. What do you see in the next couple of years? And maybe we can look at it straight as with current events. With COVID, there's a lot of changes in education and how it looks. What changes do you see? What direction would you like to see happen in relation to the foundation and the work that they're doing in the next couple of years?
I can tell you what I'm kind of working on right now, which is, I'm working with a gentleman. He's running a program called Training Grounds, and what he does is, his name's Tom Brown, and what he does is he takes folks in some of these more underserved communities, what he calls Ward 15, which is Ward 7 and 8. And he develops their skills to then go to other places to develop skills. In other words, he'll develop their life skills, make sure they know how to take care of just anything that life might throw at them, and tries to bring the kind of resources they might need so that they can be productive, and then refers them to job opportunities. It's an amazing program. He's grown tremendously since I first got to know him. And so what I want to do is help build the pathways for him to refer people to. So whether it's for jobs or for education, that's what I think society needs to do. We just have to exponentially increase the number of pathways available to young folks, so that, and they need to be well delineated, they need to be well defined, so that people can take advantage and know where to go. And I don't think that's done. In fact, I'm still trying to figure out what all those pathways that exist now. I mean, what are they right now? I still don't know what they include right now. And then so once we have a great survey of what's available now, it's like, how do we multiply that? And how do we make that more obvious and more accessible to folks who really want and can develop their lives and be productive people in our culture, in our society, in our cities. My brother Mark, he's involved with the Aspen Institute, and he's developed with them something called Aspen Spark, which I thought you'd find interesting since you're Spark 101. And that's just videos of leaders in their field who talk about what's inspiring to them and what has inspired them. Ray has been involved with 826 and Halcyon. Halcyon is an organization that develops business skills. I think that's another area to develop entrepreneurial skill sets for folks who live in underserved communities. I think there's tremendous potential. I've been meeting people who would love to start their own business, and I don't have that skill set, but if I can work with Halcyon to help them get connected with folks in Ward 8, I've done my job. And so I'm trying to learn more about Halcyon, trying to learn more about what's needed in Ward 8 to try to help those connections. I think through that, we develop more, how do I say it, sort of institutional pathways, pathways that everybody can get access to. I think the important thing to do is develop the skill sets within those communities, and that includes a business skill set. And when you go to, when you cross the river, you go into places like Ward 8, there's a lot of nonprofit activity. There's just a ton of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think it's great that people step up to run nonprofits to help their communities. But I think there needs to be more locally employed people in business. And when you have more and more folks of the community actually starting and running for-profit enterprises, that will completely change what's going on. And that way, because change is going to happen in these communities, whether the local community wants to happen or not. I've had conversations with a variety of people who've been working in these neighborhoods. There's been a lot of property development that's been going on. And one of two things can happen. The current local population gets moved out and a new population moves in. That's sort of an easy route. But a more change-oriented, effective, moral way to go is you work on the skill sets of the population that is there so they can take advantage of that development. And that's what I would love to do. We're just trying to figure out how to do that. And I think part of that equation comes from really finding people who have the potential to run their own businesses, developing their skill sets, and actually investing in them.
And does that come back to basically transforming the neighborhoods? You were talking about the different pathways to bring people into owning their business. It's really a big circle of what you're trying to do to improve the different sections of the city.
Yeah, it's a multi-pronged approach. I mean, it's why it's so hard, I think. It's just, you have to tackle these neighborhood issues from every possible direction. I mean, there's conflict, there's mental health issues, there are drug addiction issues. To provide resources and skills and training and support, mental health support, drug addiction support, all those things need to come together at once so that folks can really begin to improve their lives.
Thanks to Mike Kimsey, our guest today on Spark 101 Voices, and thank you, listeners, for joining us. You can connect with me and the whole Spark 101 team on all the socials by searching Spark 101 STEM, or visit us directly at spark101.org.